Earlier, I spoke with Edd Sorenson, safety officer at the National Speleological Society, about the biggest challenges ahead facing the rescuers.
There's always obstacles in any kind of a rescue operation like this, but they've got almost a perfect storm of everything you could possibly throw at this. So just being in an overhead is incredibly stressful for most people in a water-filled environment. The water in itself is a serious threat for these in this particular instance, because they don't swim, which means they haven't had much time in being submerged in the water. The high flow of floodwaters, the zero visibility, the not being on scuba. There's just everything you could possibly throw at these kids is here.
And so when we hear about a team of some 90 divers that are assisting in this effort, and a lot of them not being Thai divers, what layer of complexity does that add when you have something as basic as, for instance, communications possibly being a factor here?
Sure. The on-land communications before they have to go in the water is going to be difficult if they don't have somebody that speaks whatever language for the international team. But then communication in the water is extremely difficult. That's one of the things we teach in cave diving, is there's no talking. So everything has to be done usually by hand signals, but in zero visibility, it has to be touch contact. So communications is a really stressful factor.
And, you know, the notion that keeping calm is such a critical element when you talk about swimming, when you talk about being in that kind of environment, when you talk about using scuba apparatus. Can you just give us a sense of how critical that is to ensure that there is, in fact, a safe passage for these boys as they head out, the ability to maintain a sense of calm?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues with a lot of divers in cave training, is being able to handle stressful situations, even though they know it's a drill, and these kids, it's not a drill, that these stresses may rise and rise, and if stress isn't managed, it turns to panic, which is usually fatal. So that's why in cave diving, you can't even start your very first entry-level cavern until you're at least 18 years of age.
Because of that incredible amount of stress and pressure being in that environment can involve. Well, let me ask you about the conditions here, because we saw heavy rainfall coming down at the scene shortly after the crews went on break. How do you think that's going to affect the conditions? And give us a sense, if you could, Ed, I know you're obviously not there, but what is that cave environment like, where you are talking about an area there that has been flooded with water and visibility is obviously an issue?
Well, on a system like that, a lot of times it's difficult when it's wet just to navigate in the dry cave portions, and then now you've got it completely water filled, so you can't see what to touch, grab, walk in some cases because of the zero visibility water. So it's a daunting task for these kids, and just the fact that they've gotten so many of them out so far is nothing short of a miracle against all odds.
And you know, time is something that I think is a difficult thing for people to understand, why it takes so long to get the proper sort of preparation in place ahead of one of these extrication processes, where you actually are going in with your team of divers and then deciding to take out a number of people. I think a lot of folks will wonder, why does it take so long to prepare for that?
Restrictions, cliffs. There's probably loose rocks. There's hazards beyond hazards, and and when you're in zero visibility, you have to follow that line. You let go of that line, you may never get out. And if you're in a very, very, very small restriction, it's stressful, but it's not life-threatening. But you get into a bigger portion, that line may be inches from you, and it might as well be a mile away. So that line is your lifeline.
And in some of these images that we're seeing, you get a sense of just how confined a space is. And obviously they're going to need these air tanks. How does that physically work? Trying to get through some of these narrow crevices when you're relying on these air tanks to allow you to breathe, and you've got these boys that as you've pointed out, may not have experience in the water. What is that like?
Well, cave diving is an extreme sport. It has a lot of inherent risks, but when you get into what we call gear manipulation or bottle off or double bottle off restrictions, because normally cave divers have 2 tanks, not 1. So when you get to a gear manipulation restriction, that's an even more advanced stage of cave diving. You have to be very experienced just to get there. So
what does that mean? Can you explain that, Ed? What are you talking about when you say manipulation like that?
That means removal of gear. So most cave divers are never taught to remove their gear. So to do these kind of restrictions, gear off restrictions, that's an advanced form of cave diving. And I generally don't let people even take my advanced cave side mount course where we do gear manipulation and bottle off really tight restrictions until they have at least 100 minimum safe cave dives. So that's after all their training.
So the fact that they're obviously resorting to this tells you what?
It tells me that they have no choice. That's what, that's what I was saying. It's a miracle that they've gotten this many out already against unsurmountable odds.
And as we continue to watch these images, it is just so compelling, Ed, to think about what must be going through the minds of the boys who have been trapped there for more than 2 weeks, but then those now entrusted with saving them and the kind of pressure they're under as well, and what that physically requires to maintain a sense of mental focus trying to go about this mission.
Well, I mean, this would be unbelievably stressful for an experienced cave diver that's done an advanced type of gear manipulation or removal class, let alone somebody that is not an experienced scuba diver or not scuba certified at all. And these boys, as far as I understand, have never even don't even know how to swim. So if you don't know how to swim, you most likely haven't been submerged for any period of time whatsoever. So it really is miraculous that they've gotten this many out so far.
Just remarkable to think of these efforts underway. Edd Sorenson. Ed, thanks very much for helping us to understand this.
Thanks for having me. Have a nice day.